the display property, used to define how things are displayed or not displayed on screen. But what about these three, the block, inline, and inline block? What are these, and exactly why do we need them? So before we dive into the differences between these three display items, we need to understand what each one of them are. So the display block property is one of the most common ones that you're going to find. It takes up an entire line, so whenever you define a display block property, it's going to take up an entire line rather than going side by side. While the inline property, however, it's going to display things in line on the exact same line as long as there's enough space. So whenever you define an inline property, anything with an inline property is also going to be displayed on that same line as long as they're not separated by a block level element. So your block level elements are going to be things like the header tags, the div tags, and the p tags. These are all considered block level elements. So if we take a look at our inspection tools here, and we inspect these elements, we can see that the h1 is taking up its whole line. Regardless whether or not this div tag here can fit on this line, it's going to take up its own line because it is a block level element. Same with the div tag here. Regardless whether this p tag down here can fit on the same line or not, it's going to take up its own line because it is a div tag and it is a block level element. And these block level elements, they have very few restrictions, meaning you can apply just about any other CSS property to them and they will apply just fine. But these inline elements, however, are going to have a few more restrictions. So the inline elements, as you can see here, are going to be things like your span tag, your image tag, your anchor tag, and there's a few others. And these elements are going to span all on the same line as long as there's enough room. So we can fit as many inline elements on the same line as we want as long as there's enough room for them all to fit. But these inline elements, they have one major problem, and that is you cannot apply margin or padding to the top or bottom of these elements, nor can you apply height or width to them. So if I tried to apply margin top to these span tags, I can set the margin top to 50 pixels, and if I save that, you can see there's nothing that's going to apply. I could easily apply a margin left of 50 pixels, and that'll work perfectly fine. It'll add that margin to the left, but you cannot apply a margin top, nor can you apply a width or a height. So I could not apply a width of 500 even pixels. It's not going to register, it's not going to apply properly because you cannot apply those elements to inline level elements. And this is where our inline block is going to come into play, because the inline block alleviates those issues where we can add margin and padding to the top and bottom, and it'll also respect the height and the width property that is applied as well. So if I just applied this display inline block, as soon as I save, you're going to instantly see some major changes. We're going to have this width being applied to all the span tags, along with this margin top being applied to those span tags as well. If we inspect here, we can actually see that this inline block level element is now going to be a width of 500 pixels. It's going to be longer than the content that is inside of it, which is unlike an inline element. Whereas it's also going to apply the margin to the top, which otherwise it wouldn't have done if it was just a regular inline element. So just as a review, the block level elements are going to be the ones that take up an entire line. Regardless of what is on that line, it's going to take up an entire line. The inline elements are going to be the ones that sit right next to each other as long as there's enough space on that line for another inline element to sit beside it. Whereas the inline block is going to allow those inline properties, but it's also going to respect top and bottom margin and padding along with height and width. It's going to allow it to conform like a block level element, but also still have the inline properties of an inline element. And that about wraps it up for the display inline, block, and inline block level elements. If you did like the video, make sure you slap a like on it. Check out the full playlist, link is right next to me. Make sure you subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.